Hello and welcome to the Storage Syndicate Spotlight. I am Thaddeus Campbell. Joining me, as always, is Murph, Steve Murphy by the header, but Murph we know and love him by. You wouldn't imagine this, but when the countdown started 30 seconds ago before the intro, it was me by myself and nobody else. So I was feeling a little lonely on here, but we were lucky enough to have Jake hop back on and Murph join me, and joining us last but certainly not least with the beautiful NVDR sign over his shoulder,
yes,
Nick Van Dyk. Guys, want to welcome you back to the show and thanks so much. I know you guys are crazy busy right now, so I want to just thank you for carving out some time on your Wednesday evening to come and talk to us. Self-storage.
Hey, thanks for having us on, Thad. It's nice to be able to get back on here when I'm not dealing with so much imposter syndrome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Actually, I kind of wanted to ask you about that too, but we can dive into that a little later as we get into things.
Sure.
Yeah, just to update everybody, for some of you guys may remember that Nick and Jake were on with us late 2022. They had closed on what we call Veterans In-House, a property in Houston, Texas, Veterans being the name of the street. So we've assigned it that moniker. It seems crazy that was almost a full year ago. We're coming up on the 10-month mark since you guys closed on that property. And I guess kind of the reason I wanted to call you guys back on, you got some big news and closed on your second property here in the last week. Tell us a little bit about that journey and what it's been like over the last 10 months.
Jake, what are you?
Well, surprised we both still got hair. I mean, Nick's got a hat on, so he could be hiding some of that. But
it's all gone.
Yeah, it's been fun, but it's been absolutely wild.
Yeah, literally, I guess with the first one we did, we closed on it. Yeah, like Thad said, 10 months ago. It's crazy how time flies, but we're finally at that point where it's fully designed now, and we'll hopefully be getting a shovel at the ground any minute soon. So. But yeah, then the second one, we were in that search of, we've seen the value in this asset class, and we see the value of the profit and, everything that it can offer. So we were basically on the hunt for that second deal and wanting to, go crazy again and try to raise more money. And, it's almost like we're not the brightest bulb on the tree by doing it again, but obviously it's going to be, it'll be beneficial when it's done. But yeah, no, we found another one and did the exact same thing we did with the first one. Jake and I had that conversation. I was like, well, are we going to do this again? We're like, yep, let's go. Just jump, figure the rest out as you go, right?
Especially, Nick, we ran through the numbers and evaluated the deal, and it was like we knew from dealing with Thad and his team the first time on Veterans how fast you have to move and how fast you have to make a decision sometimes. And being able to jump before you check for your parachute, right?
Well, exactly. And that's the thing I tell anyone that we talk to, I'm like, you don't need to know everything to start. You just need to start, right? You just need to take that leap of faith. And if you're, like Joe says, right, if you're 70, 80% confident on something, jump, sign on the dotted line, take the leap of faith and just go and do it, right?
70% is a go. We hear that very, very frequently from Joe Evangelisti around the office. You guys, your initial deal, you hooked up with Joe through Brady McDonald, who's a big investor in Canada, moved down to the United States, actually was the first person to buy a deal from Shovel Ready Storage. You kind of had been in his hemisphere up in Canada, got exposed to us, bought your first deal from me through Shovel Ready Storage, but chose to stay in partnership with legacy developers kind of to allow us to stay on board with you. Tell me why that decision to A, buy a site that somebody else had already done all the due diligence on, and B, then keep them on board to kind of help you with some of the pieces that you may not have done before.
Yeah, well, you guys, obviously, we're on deal 2. You guys are on deal 12 or whatever you're at, right? So, we've learned a ton of stuff doing that first one, and we're applying that in the second one. At the end of the day, you guys, legacy and all, whatever, there's a ton of knowledge and a ton of value, but also a ton of contacts and resources too, right? So, there's benefit there. So if we can kind of keep the bus moving in the right direction, we're all looking at the same thing, then why wouldn't we, right?
Yeah,
Love
I mean, that's awesome. Just kind of dive in. So when we were in we were in Mexico with Jake and Nick, and this image I have is us sitting on that yacht, man, and just picturing we're talking 5 deals down the road and what this is going to look like. Kind of talk a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about what your vision is at NVDR?
Yeah, like I think goals and vision, I guess it's ever moving in my opinion, right? Like you set goals today, but then 2 years goes by, you're gonna have to tweak those goals because you're probably gonna hit them and you don't even realize that you're gonna, right? So like our goal right now is we want to get 5 deals under our belts, break that $100 million asset value, and then at the same time we also want to keep growing that, but like owning those assets is what obviously produces cash flow and wealth and all that, right? Which is you can pass that down to your kids and family, but on top of that, we want to get a couple more deals on that to just flip or to assign or whatever, because that's where you can essentially get that fast and a combination of slow money.
I love that. And I kind of dive into that. You're and this goes into a deeper conversation about how you sourced your second deal. We've kind of set up this blueprint where we have 9 deals that we bought the land. 2 of them are fully functional, open. CubeSmart's running them for us. We've got a 3rd and 4th queued up here to open their doors in the next 6-7 months. But we flipped 4 deals as well. We're actually about to flip at the end of this month 2 more. So as much as, yes, the goal is long-term to hold them, it takes some money to grease the skids along the way. There's a lot of bills that add up as you're going to this. And I love that fact that you guys are, hey, there's a playbook here, right? You've seen the playbook. You've been in rooms with the people that, and look, Legacy didn't create this playbook. We're not the first people to take this tact in building this long-term wealth. It goes to the second piece, which is you didn't source deal number 2 from me. And I'm not, you guys know this, I'm not hurt at all. I called you guys the day I heard about it and congratulated you. You sourced it from Brady McDonald, who I will forever be grateful for, because he was the first guy, as I said, who bought a deal for me. He really kind of put me on the map, but he copied our game plan and said, hey, I'm going to go out and source deals and sell them off. And he was able to find a deal that, is no short of way of saying it's the second best feasibility I've ever seen. I've only seen one that ever looked as good as that feasibility. Looks slightly better than yours, but peanuts. Flipping a coin of which one's better. So tell me a little bit about that journey and kind of like surrounding yourself with these people and what that's opened up to you.
Yeah, like I guess the easy answer is there's a lot of legwork and we're realizing that too. Like we're obviously trying to source our own deals, and there's no point of reinventing the wheel. Like obviously what's working works. So you guys are doing it, Brady's doing it. If we can all find deals, and who knows, maybe you guys buy one from us or Brady buys one from us or vice versa, right? Like at the end of the day, everyone's going to be in different positions as they grow and evolve, right? So you're going to be in acquisition mode or you're going to be in flipping mode, right? So but we've seen the opportunity there, and obviously there was I don't know, however way you want to put it, maybe Brady has other deals that he's working on, and who knows, but nonetheless the numbers were phenomenal to say the least. So Jake and I obviously seen that opportunity, and we're like, well, you either buy that and start at step 3, or do you keep finding your own deals, and then how long is that going to take to find that, right? So Jake, I don't know if you want to add anything, but pretty much that's kind of my thoughts, where there's value in having that opportunity right then and there, where you can basically jump right into closing on the site, design, and go forward.
No, for sure. And just to go off that, no, there's also this sense of like convenience to utilize the same team and the same strategies and methods that you're talking about that. And Nick and I talk about it all the time. We use the same plumber, you use the same electrician, you use the same painter, and we did that previously. So to be able to utilize the same team and the same strategy, and you just implement it. But like we said before, you're just adding a few more zeros to the overall number from anything else.
One of the things that struck me, and this happened with me when you guys worked with us on veterans initially, and I know it happened with the deal you did with Brady, because I was being talked to as this was happening. your decision making was literally lightning fast. Like, it was not a, hey, let me look this over for 4, 5, 6 days and make a decision. It was like, all right, I got the feasibility. I see what the numbers are. The next day there's a letter of intent. It might even have been the same day for all I know. It was like literally a matter of hours, not a matter of days.
Yeah,
why is that so important to you to have that kind of quick decision-making process?
Short answer, time is money, right? And at the end of the day, like, you should already know what you want before you're going to go do it versus, sit and dwell and hum and haw. Like, the whole saying of, are you interested or are you committed, right? Like, we all say that as entrepreneurs or investors, but if you really ask the question, it's a simple answer. And I think the numbers were there. We wanted one in Florida. We own houses not far from there. I know the area. I'm somewhat familiar with it. Like, I don't know. Like, when you can create an asset and have it worth $40 million when it's done, it's hard to say no to that, especially when it costs you less than half to build. So,
and
you see those 2.2 and 2.3 equity builds. Those are always fun to see.
Well, even like on top of that, like, obviously you guys are looking at it. Like, I talked to, Brian and Joe and, other people in the industry, and if everyone's looking at the same thing and seeing the same thing, and it's kind of obvious, right? So it's someone's
like a duck.
Yeah, right. So, yeah.
No, we also, Nick, we had this deal already like pre-evaluated. Not this deal, but like we had our second deal already worked out. The numbers were worked out. Our plan was worked out, and it just so happened that this one came up, and we were already prepped for it, right? We knew what we were looking for the second time around.
Yeah, and it's not like this is the first one we looked at. Like, there was other ones that we obviously considered and looked at, and it just, some of the numbers don't make sense, and when it does, yes or no,
time to go.
I think it's so interesting. Obviously, veterans, we underwrote that in a very different climate, right? We put that under contract in early 2022. Interest rates were still, like, the prime rate was still under 1. It's now, I don't even know. It's in the 5s, I think, high 4s. I don't know where it is, but it's, our lending is significantly different numbers. It is not to say by any stretch of the imagination that veterans wasn't a good looking deal and isn't still a good looking deal. But man, how interesting that the fact that you took action so fast on that veterans deal, and then you already had your plan in place for deal 2. Is it really, it all of a sudden came along, or was it destined to come along because you did take those initial actions? It's such an interesting mindset question there.
Yeah, I think, like, from the outside looking in, it's oh, they got one deal. No, they got another deal. Like, nobody else sees, like, the legwork or the background work that obviously Jake and I are doing. So yeah, there is a lot of due diligence and things that take place even before you make that decision. But like Jake said, like, we had a kind of a roadmap mapped out, and like, we've both done, a shit ton of multifamily and residential properties, and like, we're both young, eager guys, right? So it's like, well, we're going to do something. It's just a matter of what are we doing? It's not that we're not doing something. So
I love that. I was going to ask it and, kind of switch gears a little bit here, because this all sounds rainbows and butterflies, what we're talking about, right? Hey, this deal just fell in our lap. It's $20 million to build. It's $42 million it's worth when it's done. Veterans, hey, we made this decision super quick. Veterans was a freaking challenge, man. You guys had to raise money on that deal in what I think is probably the worst fundraising environment since 2008, 2009, maybe one of the worst we've ever seen, because interest rates were so unpredictable. Nobody knew what the Fed was going to do long term. And you guys are going out to try and not just collect money, but really collect Canadian money. The conversion rate is not near end. So talk to me a little bit about the challenges you guys faced funding that initial deal.
Yeah, well, to talk about, obviously, fundraising, that's it's always an interesting thing, right? Because everybody's interested. Everybody. Yeah. Oh, you hear you're paying a 10% pref and it's paid monthly, and everybody's, yeah, I'm in.
when you go to
Getting money in the account is a different thing, and getting someone to sign on the line and hand you that draft, especially when it's in US and 90% of our raises are in Canada. So the conversion hasn't been great. It's starting to come down a little bit now, but this time around, I think we've done, or I have to say, Nick's done a very good job with social media and getting information out there. So I think a lot of people are more comfortable with it. It's not something that's been brand new either. Whereas we've been in multifamilies before, or financial industry as my background, this is all of a sudden something new. You're slowly building trust. You're slowly building an understanding. You're slowly, building a brand again with people that people are eventually going to learn to trust.
Yeah, like I've been pretty much, I'm sure Jake has too. Like, we've been raising capital for all of our real estate transactions anyways. Like, this is nothing new. So it's just, instead of raising whether it's 300 grand or $1 million for a deal, you're raising 3 or 5. So it's just the same thing over and over again. And like, whether you're selling or raising capital, the logistics behind it are all the same. Like, you got to earn trust with people, and you got to educate them, right? And then ultimately you're selling, and you're just selling that product, right? Like, and if you have as much faith and passion in it, that will all be repelled when you're communicating about it. So I think it's that, and then fortunately we know a lot of people, and there's some wealthy families out there that we obviously have made that connection with, so that helps.
You brought something up, which is I love to talk about this idea of transference in sales, right? Where your belief in something, the saying goes, they don't have to believe it, they have to believe you believe it, right? And Jake brought up an amazing point, which is you're no longer selling them the same thing, right? I'm an apple salesman, and all of a sudden I'm selling oranges. I got to go back and rebuild trust to a certain extent, with even if it's the same client base. So my question for you guys is, how much easier is it now for you guys to really believe as you're funding this second project versus the first one, where it's brand new for, even though it's raising money for real estate, but it was a whole new asset class for you guys, man. You were like jumping out of the airplane, not knowing if the parachute was going to deploy. This time you've deployed the parachute once already. How much easier has it been to get in front of those people and talk about bringing in $100,000, $150,000 checks?
Yeah, like I've always been like relatively comfortable talking about money in front of people, where it's an uncomfortable conversation that most people have, but I don't know, for some reason I'm okay with it. But it's like, yeah, you got to earn trust and all that stuff, but doing all this stuff, like, this was the big sales pitch between like all of our Canadian investors. And it wasn't like, none of it's a sales pitch. We're just stating the facts, and they're realizing it just like we're realizing. And, we're developing these sites in the US where land value compared to Canada is at a fraction of the cost. Not only that, but there's 10 times the amount of more people in the US than it is in Canada. So here you got more money, cheaper land, and then you got high demand because you're in southern states and nobody has basements, and you want to go develop a storage facility that's a necessity. So it's like, it's almost hard to screw up, right? And people realize that, and then there's so much value, and like, you're pretty much just educating them, and then obviously you build that rapport and trust, and next thing you know it, they're sending you a wire for 200 or 400 grand. So,
and it's been like sorry, Fab, you had said that it was through some of the worst times as well. To raise funds for VMD. Well, I think now this time, especially this timing, and I can't speak for Nick, but with having history in the financial industry and the markets being the way that they are and the way that they behave for the last few years, I think something that's going to be a lot more consistent and stable, that's going to provide a steady 10%, is something that somebody in the market's not going to see or hasn't seen for a few years now. Yeah, that's also appealing to an investor when you can show them the track record of the asset class compared to the market or even the housing market.
I wonder, and I'll ask this, and I honestly don't know the answer. What's it feel like for you guys when you send those pref checks out every month?
It just happens automatically.
Yeah. All right. I think I hit a quick, right? Yeah.
Honestly, it is cool to see, like, holy shit, look how much money that we send out every single month, right? But it's also awesome to know that, like, you're paying other people a good return, and, like, I've raised money for a lot of stuff, and like you can literally change a person's life by investing into something like this, right? So it's cool to see like you're helping people and you're giving back and all that other stuff. But yeah, it's we're sending a lot of money to say the least. But
it's so interesting, and I guess we'll bring this up for people that are listening. We're talking about a 10 pref, and what this means, guys, is if somebody put $100,000, let's use 150 because I think that's in Canadian what you guys were raising for the veterans deal, typical investment. You're sending them $15,000 a year just in preferred payment. That means the initial interest they're going to make off their investment, not counting whatever their equity is going to give them later on down the road as this asset starts to produce, whether it's refi money or sale money or just general cash flow from the property. Every month that you hold their $150,000, they're getting 1/12 of $15,000. You don't see that return anywhere else. Like that doesn't exist.
We've actually had conversations with investors. It's funny. Like every investor is different. And I've had conversations from one guy and he's like, you are giving out way much more than you actually need to. And then you talk to someone else and they're like, I'm only getting 1% of this. I'm like, you're not understanding the whole story here. But yeah, no, we have talked to a lot of investors where they're like you're paying out a 10 pref. Like that's huge, right?
It's such an interesting statement of the asset class we've all found ourselves in where, for literally years, you're talking about 20 and 30% IRRs, internal rate of return. And a 20% IRR means you get your investment back in 5 years, right? That's unheard of in the regular world. And it's just been normal in self-storage. I think on veterans and on our deals, typically we're estimating somewhere in the mid-teens for an IRR for our investors. We're always conservative in that underwriting. But think about that, the stock market's grown. Everyone thinks stocks is the place to be, and it's grown by an average of 8% over 100 and something years. Here we're in self-storage. You got a 40-year track record in the 20s, and you don't have to pay a broker, half of your commission to get that return. It's kind of remarkable when you start and stop and break it down.
Absolutely.
And it's neat because at the same time, Nick's talking about the different types of people we've got investing. It's like you're changing people's lives. And now we've got certain investors like this one that we just went out and purchased a brand new car, $100,000 vehicle. And instead of paying for that in cash, decided to invest with us and we're making their monthly payment for their vehicle.
Well, not even
without touching their principal.
Like we have, like, obviously there's a lot of, like, the majority of the money we raise has been from Canada. Like, sure, we've raised some of it from the US, but a lot of people also, like, they want some diversification. They want to have currency, like a different currency, right? Like versus like Canada's, high valued place, but is it high valued or is it really inflated? So a lot of people, like, they're like, it's nice to have some diversification with having money in a different country. But even that, like, we got some investors that are like, well, I'm just going to use all this pref payment to pay for my trips when I go to the States. Right. So they're using it for other purposes, which is obviously wonderful.
That's
it's
fantastic.
tangible. You're actually seeing and touching your return every month rather than being like, 5-10 years from now, it's going to give you this average 8%, right? Yeah. But for the first 2 years, it's going to be in the negatives and you still can't touch it.
Yeah. And you don't have to lock it up in a CD to get a 5% return where you can't touch it for 3-4 years, right?
Yeah.
Pretty cool. I was going to dig in a little bit and again, go back to kind of like the gritty, dirty side of this thing. You guys are going through the banking process on the veterans deal, getting ready to close to break ground. Man, it's been, and we're going through this on a bunch of our deals. Banking this year is significantly different than it was a year and a half ago. Tell me a little bit about what that process has been like and the perseverance it's taken to kind of get through it.
It takes a village.
What's that?
It takes a village.
Yeah, it's we're getting there. We can see light at the end of the tunnel. Like, we're hoping to close on our construction loan next week or something. So
yeah.
Finally, like, it's been a lot of hoops to jump through. The biggest hurdle is we're Canadian doing this in the US. So we talk to a lender and they're like, yeah, we'll do construction loan and yada, 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 until they go and see your legal structure. And there's like, all these LPs and GPs and LLCs and this, that, and the other. And like, it's confusing to the average, banker. So you're almost educating the financing people as well, because like you have to essentially teach them how this whole structure is working. And then in the meantime, you got your attorney, the bank's attorney. If you have a sponsor, they have an attorney. You got all these, too many cooks in the kitchen, and they all have to get paid. So all that costs money. And it just, the more conversations they have, it just costs more and more and more. But we're learning so much during this first one. And obviously, like, there's a perspective at different levels. So what we learned in this first one, you could dwell and being like, oh, that sucked, or that was horrible to deal with. Or I'm always in the mindset of like, well, how am I not going to have to do that for the second time? Right. So then on the second one, obviously you'll learn and you'll tweak and you just keep improving as you go. But it's been a pain in the ass, to say the least. Short way to put it.
I bring these questions up quite purposefully. Like, this is not for the faint of heart, man. Not everyone is made to be a commercial real estate. I think everyone could own a couple of rental doors. I don't think that's above anybody's purview to be able to do, but not everyone's cut out, man. And I watch, like, within our office, I always talk about Brian Brogan, and Nick, you're wired, I think, very similarly. He's like, I call him now the eye of the storm. That's my nickname. I kind of came up for him today, right? Like, this ability to just stay calm when there's like 200-mile-an-hour winds going in every direction around him. There's a lot of stuff that you better be able to have some stress management. We won't talk about maybe how Brian deals with a lot of that stress, but you better have some outlets to be able to cope with stress, right?
Yeah, it's well, like, I think it's any entrepreneur or investor, right? Like, I've said it every single deal that I've done, from buying a single family house to a duplex to an apartment building to ripping a roof off and adding a big second story addition to doing these self-storage developments. I'm like, there's always a moment in time where you're like, holy shit, what did I just do? And should I do this? Like, I'm already in it. And you just keep plugging away and keep working through those issues, and everything comes, like, all these issues eventually get sorted out. And like, there's always a solution. It's just a matter of your persistence and just keep pushing forward. And I think just knowing that in your head, that like, there's always a solution, and I'm just going to keep pushing. So this problem isn't really a problem. I'm sure it's a problem now, but I know it's not going to be a problem. So why worry about it, right? But it's obviously easier said than done, and the more problems you deal with, the better you get.
I think that we have this saying that we always talk about, where the bigger the problems you can solve, the bigger the checks you end up cashing, right? And I think one of the things that is
cashing,
so
like paying, or cashing as in receiving.
We like to think it's receiving eventually. Yeah. At some point, it's going to come this way, right?
At some point.
My point being there, like, you talked about how every one of those deals, something came up where it made you have that oh shit moment, right? But the reality is, you learn something every time that you then know for the rest of your life, right? You have a piece of knowledge for the rest of your life that has a lot of value to it.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And like, we've been like, the more I'm doing this, and the more I'm obviously invested in real estate, and it's been a few years now, to say the least. And now we're talking to other people or other clients or other, people who want to get into real estate, or, people that even want to, like, other Canadians and investors that we're talking to, and they're like, I want to get into storage, and we see what you're doing. Like, how can we do that? And like, all of this stuff, like, anybody can do, but it's, it's having that right mindset, I feel like, because if you're not wired a certain way, you're going to be, banging your head off the wall.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about it. You literally have Steve, go ahead.
No, I was going to throw that Jake's way out, to be honest. I mean, I'm just thinking here, a year ago, we're getting ready to go to Las Vegas, and you guys, again, we're talking about veterans. You're worried about banking. I think you even went to a couple of banks with Brian out there, didn't you? So talk about mindset, where you were back then to going into that second deal. I know, Jake, right before we started, we talked about imposter syndrome, and we've had multiple conversations, you and I, at different events. So how are you now versus you were a year ago, mindset wise, and moving forward.
Well, night and day, to be honest. A whole lot more comfortable. The more you live and breathe something, I dedicated 15 years of my previous career to that. Your knowledge base is surrounding what you're doing for 15 years. Learning something new is entirely different. I think now that, Nick and I are in this literally every day, and from Nick, 5 in the morning, sometimes we're texting already until 10, 11 o'clock at night. Sometimes you're just bound to learn it inside and out. And I mean, I don't know everything, and I don't think that you're ever going to know everything. But we have great teams around us, and we've learned a ton from each and every person that we've interacted with within this circle. And the learning curve has just really taken off, and it's, along with the comfort level.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now, yes, you're dealing with problems, but you already have that base knowledge, and the problems don't seem as big because you continue to learn, and that's you have the ability to deal with it better.
Yeah, like I always say, and again, I learned this from my Opa, and it was, is it a life or death situation? No. Is it going to matter in 5 or 10 years? No. Is there anything you can do about it? No. Well, then there's no point of worrying about it. Just move on. Come up with a solution and move on, right? So I think I apply that to pretty much everything. And there is moments where you can do something and it is a life or death situation, but that's just the nature of the game, unfortunately.
Well, Nick, we were talking yesterday about something costing us, I think it was like an additional $120,000. And we were like, it's a $40 million site. Does it really matter?
Yeah. That's like, I went to an event this past weekend in Cleveland and was, talking to Tim Bratz and Mark Evans. And we were talking about like $100 problems, $1,000 problems, $100,000 problems, $1 million problems, right? Like, I think that you were just talking about that earlier. So it's like, the bigger the problem, the bigger the check, right?
We had this conversation the other day, Brian and I, and we had an opportunity. We have a project that we're selling, for multiples of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we had the opportunity to maybe flip it a little quicker for less money, and it was like, $75,000 doesn't really mean shit to us right now. It really doesn't. It doesn't do anything for us. Right. And what an amazing, we looked at each other and we just laughed, right? We're having this conversation where we could literally make 75 grand tomorrow and it does nothing for us whatsoever. Like, how amazing is it to be in this position in life where how many people will ever be able to just piss away 75 grand? Because you know what? I'd rather wait a few months and such an amazing thing to get that place in your life.
Yeah, I'm glad that's not just us, Nick.
Yeah, but it doesn't happen overnight. That's for sure.
No, and listen, the reason 75 grand doesn't matter to us is because we literally have $1 million problems, right? We've got millions of dollars that we have to come up with, but we're talking about, for us, you guys are trying to get to that $100 million mark. We've got $200 million of assets that we're managing right now. But let me rephrase that. We have assets that are projected to be worth over 200 million. So $1 million or $2 million in money that we have to come up with against $200 million of value is really not it seems crazy to say that, right? Like, hey, I need $1 million next month. Well, okay, but I'm $100 million into these projects and they're worth 200 million. Is it really that big of a problem? No. Is there somebody out there that's going to say that again?
As long as you can solve it, as long as you have that mindset and know that you can, right, it'll all come to fruition.
I think that's one of the reasons that I personally love being around guys like you, where I just see the actions that you take, and it gives you no choice, right? Go dial the phone, call the next person in your. I used to say I'm old enough to say Rolodex. You guys don't even know what the hell a Rolodex is, but call the next person in your Rolodex and work through it until you find somebody who sees the opportunity in that place and is able to have a win-win. You guys have done that so well. In Vegas, you partnered up with you guys are Canadian, right? You're not allowed to sign a bank loan in the United States on a project. You got to bring somebody in who's a key partner for you. You guys really kind of, I would say, knocked it out of the park with that deal. And I don't want to say who they are because I don't want everyone banging their door down trying to, get them to help them out. But you guys made an impression on this family, and they've really been a person that's moved the needle for you guys.
100%. And you were talking a little bit before in terms of like our closing on VMD and the loan and the whole process with lawyers and their lawyers and our lawyers and the bank's lawyers. It's nice that we have such a good relationship with them at this point that like we're hammering out calls together to orchestrate and go back to our lawyers with the details on how we want things written up, right? We've got that relationship where we can sit down and have those open and honest conversations about what everybody needs to, what we need, what they need to protect themselves, what we need to protect ourselves, and at the end of the day, how we can move forward as a team and make sure that this gets done. So the relationships that have been built amongst the families involved are amazing and second to none.
I think this goes to my natural follow-up to this, which is one of the things I respect about you two so much is you're not penny wise, pound foolish, right? It cost you some significant equity in the project to bring this family on board as your partners, but you weren't short-sighted about it, right? You saw the value in having that long-term relationship of being able to rely on them for some areas that you had no experience on, but they did.
That's right. Who, not how. And, like relationships are huge. I feel that like, yeah, we gave up maybe a little bit more equity than we would have rathered, or maybe other deals are different, but I feel you get it in other ways. Like we got some pretty good bank terms, I feel, compared to other sites and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so like,
I'm slightly jealous. I'm going to just tell you right now. I know what your terms are on your loan on veterans, and I'm a little annoyed by it. I'm not going to lie.
Like
I'm not annoyed that you bought a deal from somebody else, but I am annoyed that your bank terms are a little bit better than ours.
Yeah, well, hey, it's the old saying is you get what you pay for, right? Like,
100%.
It's no complaints to say the least. So it's
and they believe in our deal and in us just as much to be able to put their neck out and also find an investor or two for us along the way. So I think that goes a long way in saying what we can do and what they think about us, just the same as we think about them.
Yeah, and like at the end of the day, certain people are in different positions in their life and they're looking for certain things, right? So just like raising capital, if you can like solve somebody's problem, you're already that much further ahead. And like if we can help them in the position that they're in and they want to grow, but maybe they don't want to do as much, well, it's a win-win.
I think that you bring up such an amazing point, and this is something I really didn't realize until I was in my late 40s. So you guys are so far ahead of me. Really is a revelation I've had in the last couple of years is that there's so many things I don't want to do. I'm very aware of the things I don't want to do. What I never realized is that there are people out there that really want to do the things that I hate and hate to do the things that I would do all day, every day, right? And finding those people to kind of round out your team, I would say that's been you guys' absolute ninja skill.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's the same. It's same as like, you go and flip a property and, I hate doing drywall. I don't know many people who like doing drywall, right? You find somebody to do the drywall. It's the same concept. I don't like doing admin work, so I find an administrator. I don't like doing bookkeeping. I find a bookkeeper. And like the more who's you have is how you're ultimately going to grow, because you can essentially have more people doing all the things that you don't want to do to essentially grow. So, but yeah, absolutely.
Not to mention those people are probably going to do it better than you because you're going to do it begrudgingly and they're going to do it willingly, right? So
exactly.
Yeah, guys, I want to thank you again. So thankful for you guys coming on and joining us. You guys that don't follow, Eric's on point as always. Go look these guys up. Nick and Jake are both on social media. You can look them up on Facebook. You can look them up on Instagram. If you're not following them, they're putting out the type of content that I thrive off of, which is positivity. It's, mindset. It's taking action. It's things that remind me every day of what the things are we need to do to really be successful in life. You're going to see them with their families all the time too, which is a big part of both of your lives, which we didn't really get into a whole lot now. But how important has that been for you guys? I know both of you had full-time 40-hour-a-week jobs. Jake, you just left last year. Nick, you've been out of it for a little bit while. But how has transitioning into commercial real estate specifically helped you kind of develop that other aspect of your life family-wise?
Great. Like short answer. Like it's like this the residential or the single family, this like you got to do a lot more deals in order to generate this like the same amount of more money. So it's like it's kind of like I don't know, quality over quantity kind of thing. But it's so far it's been good. Like there's again, goes back to problems, and there's different problems in the commercial real estate than it is smaller residential deals. But like they're good problems to have, I guess. So we're fortunate to be in the position we are, and at the end of the day, we're thankful for syndication, self-storage, and obviously you guys too. So Thad, I actually had one question for you.
I answer them.
How has it been for you guys? Like, there's always the questions about us Canadians, and it's how is it as like you Americans been working like working with us being Canadian on this side of the border?
For me specifically, I'm so thankful for you guys. Between you and Brady, as I said, you really helped me launch my business. So I'm going to say, and I guess the one thing that I love, my story is my dad grew up on a 40-acre potato farm. And that's my anchor in my life is the family farm, right? He grew up literally dirt poor. The idea of everything that needed to be done, you did. Right? Like you just took care of what needed to be done. And even though I didn't grow up on the farm, I worked one summer on the farm. And when I said there's shit I don't want to do, labor is like chief among them. I do not want to be, driving the tractor and pulling rock. I have that farmer's mentality of like, you go out and you get the shit done. And you guys working, and we're now working with Martin May, who's another Canadian, Brady, obviously, you and Jake, you guys are just wired in a way where it's like, hey, we get on a phone call. Here's what we got to do. Here's what we're going to do about it. Bye. And I freaking love that, right? We were talking about lawyers earlier, right? You get on the phone with a lawyer. Here's the problem. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do again. Here's what we're going to do again. Let's talk about the problem again. Here's what we're going to do again. And our bill is racking up. Dealing with you guys, succinct is the word that comes to mind. And I freaking love that, right? For shovel ready storage, I have values, right? It's SHIP, it's speed, honesty, integrity, partnership. And for me, I want to partner with people that don't waste my time, that act with honesty and integrity in everything, right? That tell me the truth, and not only tell me the truth when it serves them, but tell me the truth even when it doesn't serve them, right? That have integrity. And so if you ask me how I would sum that up, you guys are the type of people I want to be in partnership with, because that's the way you're wired, man. We're going to get this stuff done. We're going to make decisions quickly. We're going to work through problems. They're going to be friggin' hard problems. We know about it. You didn't call me up 4 months after you'd signed on the dotted line to buy veterans and bitch and moan because raising money was hard. Right? You could have easily done that. You could have called me up and said, hey, Thad, why the hell did you convince me to buy this property? No, we're going to figure it out. Right. We're going to do what we need to do. And I could not have more respect for you guys, and not just you and Jake, but as I said, Brady, if he's watching, and Martin's getting ready to close his first deal the end of this month. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's because winters are so tough and you guys got to work together to get shit done. But that Canadian mindset, it's pretty cool. Cool. That was a long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, the short answer was that we're all kind of similar in like mindset, right? I mean, when challenges come up, I mean, I'm kind of speaking for Joe and Brian here, but it's the who, not how. I mean, those situations, we never worked with Canadians before either. And so things were happening, but we know there's a solution. There's always a solution. We said it all the time in the office. You just got to find it, Right. So we're all problem solvers, and especially Brian. We always credit him as being the guy that solves it all no matter what the conditions are. We know we'll find a solution, and that's it. But working with the right people, the right mindset makes it all possible. And I mean, to answer that too, that's why we love the Canadians so far. So
we don't just say sorry all the time. We just figure shit out and move forward.
That's it.
Look, it's so easy to find a reason not to do something.
Yep.
Right. We're ingrained. That's survival instinct. As human beings, we're literally in our DNA is to avoid stress, avoid things that are dangerous. And, you guys, you're the opposite. It's like move towards it instead of away from it. So appreciate that so much. And look, guys, it's 7:45. I try and honor your time. You guys are so gracious to come and join us. Appreciate you guys coming on. I'm sure we'll have you here when you guys buy deal number 3 and 4 and 5. We'll get you back on. appreciate the insight and love hearing your story as always.
Cool. Thanks for having us.
Appreciate having us, guys.
Appreciate you guys.
Quick bit of technical stuff. We will not be on next week. We're moving to every 2 weeks for you guys, just so you know. It's just our lives and trying to make sure we have family time and all those good things. 2 weeks, a really cool show. Terry Anderson's coming to join us. He is one of the principals in Big Toy. What's the
Toy Storage Nation?
Toy Storage Nation. Thanks, Steve.
Boat and RV
I knew I could count on. Boat and RV is kind of where self-storage was 10, 15 years ago. So really excited to get some insight from him. A very hard asset class to underwrite because we don't have as much information as we do in self-storage. He is at the forefront of really understanding that market. So if you guys want to get some really good insight into the boat and RV storage, come and join us 2 weeks, Wednesday night, 7 o'clock, as always. That is it for tonight's Storage Syndicate Spotlight. Jake, Nick, Murph, as always, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Love you guys. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks.
Have a good night.